Federal workers' jobs are stressful enough. The rise in New York City's cost of living is stressful enough. The fact that Mr. Obed's family cannot be reunified due to fears over the Muslim ban is stressful enough. His several $1,000 a month Bronx mortgage is stressful enough. The anti-immigrant sentiment of this administration is stressful enough.
The ultimate aim of society should be to make sure that people are not targeted, not harassed, and not murdered because of who they are, where they come from, who they love, or how they pray.
One child, one teacher, one book, and one pen can change the world.
Hey guys, welcome to my channel. And in this video on analysing non-fiction, I'll be discussing rhetorical devices. But first, a quick note. This video contains 12 rhetorical devices you should know. It's just a brief overview on all of them, but the video is quite long, and as a result, I don't encourage watching the video in one sitting from start to finish. Instead, use sections as and when you need them, however you need them. Here are a list of the 12 devices you can find in the video. Below them, you'll see the timestamps. Use these to help you navigate the video so you can locate the one you need. So, what are rhetorical devices? Rhetoric is effective persuasive language which can be understood using Aristotle's rhetorical appeals. However, whilst it's important to recognise and analyse pathos, ethos and logos, these appeals are quite general. Rhetorical devices, on the other hand, are specific techniques that can be used to underline the messages of our arguments. They work by having an impression on the audience, making what you're saying memorable and impactful. Let's begin with a speech from Barack Obama, who uses certain types of questions to have an impact.
Are we a nation that tolerates the hypocrisy of a system where workers who pick our fruit and make our beds never have a chance to get right with the law? Or are we a nation that gives them a chance to make amends, take responsibility, and give their kids a better future? Are we a nation that accepts the cruelty of ripping children from their parents' arms? Or are we a nation that values families and works together to keep them together?
Barack Obama uses a type of device known as a rhetorical question. A rhetorical question is a question which does not need an answer. Instead, the answer should be clear or implied, and so a rhetorical question can be used to control the thoughts and feelings of an audience. Take the case of Obama's example. He asked 4 rhetorical questions. The ones highlighted in green basically ask his American audience if they're a nation of selfless, compassionate, and kind individuals. Or in red, if they're selfish, indifferent, and mean. He implies that they're kind and compassionate by giving them only one other alternative, that they're not. He controls the point and its reception by manipulating the thoughts and feelings of the audiences through questions he does not expect an answer to. However, rhetorical questions are not the only type of question Obama uses. Another type of rhetorical device is where one can ask a question and immediately provide the answer. This is known as Hypophora. Obama does this as well.
So what does middle-class economics require in our time? First, middle-class economics means helping working families feel more secure in a world of constant change. It means helping folks afford childcare, college, healthcare, a home, retirement. And my budget will address each of these issues, lowering the taxes of working families and putting thousands of dollars back into their pockets each year.
By doing this, Obama shows that he has all of the answers. He portrays himself as being an authority on the subject and controls the argument by giving the answers instead of leaving it open to multiple interpretations. Next up, we have a famous speech from General MacArthur.
Duty, honor, country. Those 3 hallowed words reverently dictate what you ought to be, what you can be, what you will be. They are your rallying points to build courage when courage seems to fail, to regain faith when there seems to be little cause for faith, to create hope when hope becomes forlorn.
MacArthur uses the rule of three to make his point. The best things come in threes. The three pigs, Goldilocks and the three bears, the three blind mice, the Holy Trinity. Our brains seem to gravitate towards patterns, and 3 is a number that seems natural to us. So, by using the rule of 3 in your arguments, you can make your point more memorable. It also creates a feeling of rhythm, a natural rhythm, and it makes your points feel natural to the audience.
Fear is the path to the dark side. Fear leads to anger. Anger leads to hate. Hate leads to suffering.
Thanks, Yoda. Yoda's using a device known as Anadiplosis. You can see that the following sentence begins with the same idea as ended in the sentence before. The first ends with anger and the second begins with it. Then it ends with hate, which starts the third. You can think of Anadiplosis as a set of trains, where the end and beginning of connecting sections are the same type of train. Another famous example can be seen with Malcolm X.
You change your philosophy, you change your thought pattern. Once you change your thought pattern, you change your attitude. Once you change your attitude, it changes your behavior pattern. And then you go on into some action.
Anadiplosis creates a natural rhythm which makes a point more memorable. It also feels as though the speaker is building up to a climax which captivates an audience. Next, we have an example from one of the most famous speeches of all times, Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech.
I am happy to join with you today in what will go down in history as the greatest demonstration for freedom in the history of our nation. 50 years ago, a great American in whose symbolic shadow we stand today signed the Emancipation Proclamation.
It's important to note that Martin Luther King gave this speech in front of the Lincoln Memorial in Washington, D.C. Now, about 100 years before the end of the Civil War, when Lincoln was the president, he freed the slaves, and he gave a speech at the end of the war which begins with the lines, 77 years ago. Now, Martin Luther King alludes to this speech and therefore alludes to Lincoln by giving his speech similarly. An allusion is basically where you reference or recycle another text. For instance, everyone knows the story of the movie Cinderella. It's a famous text. I can recycle or reference this. For instance, I might say my life is a Cinderella story. Now my audience will know from my allusion that I might mean my life is a rags to riches tale. Allusions can be really effective in rhetoric. Take Martin Luther King's example. He appeals to the audience's sense of authority and their emotions. His audience will connect him to Abraham Lincoln. Abraham Lincoln said 77 years ago, and Martin Luther King says 50 years ago. The allusion makes the audience trust him, connecting him to Lincoln, a president whom many see as one of America's best. Also, by doing this, he inspires a sense of patriotism in them, a love for their nation and a sense of duty. Next, we have Baz Luhrmann, who once...
Don't worry about the future, or worry, but know that worrying is as effective as trying to solve an algebra equation by chewing bubble gum.
Baz Luhrmann's using an analogy. An analogy is similar to a simile or metaphor. A metaphor might say time is a thief, and a simile, time is like a thief. An analogy, on the other hand, might be time is like a thief in that thieves steal physical objects and time steals moments of our lives. Now, similes and metaphors are great devices. They're a way of comparing one thing to another in order to highlight certain characteristics of our subject. Analogies provide a little more detail and explain the relationships between things. In rhetoric, they're a great way of explaining complicated issues in a simple manner in order to get our point across. Next up, we have JFK.
Let every nation know, whether it wishes us well or ill, that we shall pay any price, bear any burden, meet any hardship, support any friend, oppose any foe, to assure the survival and the success of liberty.
JFK uses parallelism. What is parallelism? Well, the clue's in the name. It is using parallel grammatical structures in succession. Here, JFK follows a parallel pattern of verb plus any plus noun. Parallelism can be used to really hammer a point across. The repetition of grammatical structures almost bash ideas into our minds through the natural rhythm it creates. There are, however, more specific types of parallel structures. Carol Davis in her Coast Guard speech shows us another type of parallel structure.
I ask you to look back on your moments of powerlessness. Look back to that moment where you had to get on your knees and scrub and sweep and mop and wax and buff and buff and buff and rebuff and buff again a floor that someone was going to walk on and probably scuff 2 minutes later. That feeling is what it is to be human. Humble yourself and accept your humanity, and don't deny it in others.
Carol Davis repeats the word and. This would usually be considered a run-on sentence and is grammatically incorrect, but it can be used in literature and rhetoric and is known as polysyndeton. Polysyndeton is repeating conjunctions, for, and, nor, but, or, yet, so. Think fanboys. By doing this, it creates a feeling of excess, like there are multiple items, events, choices, regrets, or problems, depending on the conjunction and the list. Again, it creates a sense of rhythm and makes our arguments more memorable, as though one is reaching a climax, grabbing the audience's attention. The opposite of polysyndeton is known as asyndeton. Instead of repeating conjunctions in a list, you remove them altogether. The list goes on with no conjunctions. Here's an example from President Nixon.
When we listen to the better angels of our nature, we find that they celebrate the simple things, the basic things, goodness, decency, love, kindness. Greatness comes in simple trappings.
By removing conjunction, each idea feels similarly important, like they're all equal. It hammers his ideas into our brains as the list of positive items is presented in succession. Now we return again to Martin Luther King.
I have a dream that one day this nation will rise up and live out the true meaning of its creed. We hold these truths to be self-evident, that all men are created equal. I have a dream that one day on the red hills of Georgia, the sons of former slaves and the sons of former slave owners will they be able to sit down together at the table of brotherhood. I have a dream that one day, even the state of Mississippi, a state sweltering with the heat of injustice, sweltering with the heat of oppression, will be transformed into an oasis of freedom and justice. I have a dream. I have a dream. I have a dream. I have a dream.
Here, Martin Luther King uses another type of parallel structure called Anaphora. Anaphora is where a word or phrase is repeated at the beginning of each sentence or clause. This is particularly effective in rhetoric, making speeches especially memorable. Take Martin Luther King's I Have a Dream speech. The speech repeats the lines I have a dream and his vision for equality. This speech is iconic and can be recognised anywhere, just showing you how effective anaphora can be. On the other hand, if one is to repeat words or phrases at the end of a sentence, unlike anaphora, this can be known as epistrophe. Lyndon B. Johnson's famous speech during the Civil Rights Movement, when African Americans were finally given the right to vote, shows an example of this.
There is no Negro problem. There is no Southern problem. There is no Northern problem. There is only an American problem. And we are met here tonight as Americans, not as Democrats or Republicans. We are met here as Americans to solve that problem.
Lyndon B. Johnson finishes each sentence or clause with the word problem, highlighting that there is one, and as a nation rallying support, rallying the country, its citizens, its politicians to solve this problem and come together unified. Just like anaphora, epistrophe can be really effective. So, epistrophe is repeating words at the end of a clause or sentence. And anaphora is repeating words or sentences at the beginning of a clause or sentence. Well, what about repeating words or phrases at the beginning and at the end of sentences or clauses? Well, this is known as Symploce. One notable example of Symploce is from a speech from Malcolm X.
Much of what I say might sound bitter, but it's the truth. Right. Much of what I say might sound like it's stirring up trouble, but it's the truth. Right. Much of what I say might sound like it is hate, but it's the truth.
Again, Symploce is really effective at making speeches memorable. They begin and end and captivate us. Remember, rhetorical devices are vital tools to any author or public speaker trying to persuade or argue. By using specific rhetorical devices, you can appeal to the emotions of an audience, whether you inspire love, fear, passion, pride, or anger. You might do this through rhetorical questions, the rule of three, allusions, or epistrophe, to name just a few ways. You can use rhetorical devices to present facts and statistics which cannot be argued with, appealing to your audience's intellect. Perhaps you allude to a study or an expert in the field. You might list statistics with Polysyndeton or Asyndeton. You can allude to other speakers, authors, or texts whom the audience look up to and respect, using an ethical appeal. You can use rhetorical devices to make your points memorable, or you can create a natural rhythm to your points. Use types of parallelism such as parallel structure, anaphora, epistrophe, or Symploce. Consider using the rule of three. And you can use these devices to hit home, to hammer in certain ideas, get them stuck in your audience's head. Use Hypophora or rhetorical questions to control the way ideas are presented, to control how an audience feels or thinks about an idea. You can come across like the expert, a person who has all of the answers with Hypophora. Or you can ask rhetorical questions, leaving them with only one answer, an answer you want them to have. If you have complex ideas, consider making them simple by providing clear and engaging analogies that help to explain. Whatever your persuasion, there's a rhetorical device for you. Thank you for watching. The next time you listen to a speech or you read an article, what rhetorical devices can you spot? What effect do they have on their audience? And do they support the purpose of the speech or the text?